27 kilograms. That was the weight of this backpack on my latest journey from source to sea down the River Parrett. And today I've loaded the bag back up and I'm going to show you exactly what I was carrying and why it was so heavy. So I've just pulled out all of my gear and you might be thinking, Ed, that's a lot of stuff. But I promise you there was a reason for all of it. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell you about it all now. And before we properly get into this, I just want to show off my new t-shirt design. So I commissioned this especially for the River series and I'm really happy with how they came out. So if you'd like to pick up yours, you can right now. They're available to buy. There's various different colours and it supports what I do. Okay, stop selling, let's get on with stuff. So as I go through this stuff, I'm going to put a little tally of weight in the corner so you can see that go up. Right, so the first item is this backpack. I've had this since I was at school, since I was doing the Duke of Edinburgh Award. It is the Berghaus 65+10, probably far too heavy for the job. It's not a light backpack, but it's got a kind of framework in the back of it. And it's got a lot of places where you can lash stuff to the bag, which is very helpful for the river trip, especially lashing the boat on. Now, camping gear. So this is the tent that I took with me. It is the Terra Nova Solar Photon 2. It's a two-man tent, but it's effectively a one-man tent with a lot of space for stuff. This is the tent that I took with me on the World Unicycle Tour, and it did me a lot of nights, I'll tell you that much. But at this point, it's basically falling apart. The zips no longer work, water seems to seep in through the ground sheet. I need to upgrade it, but it is the lightest tent that I own at this point, so that's why I took it with me. Next up is the sleeping pad, and this is a similar story to the tent. I got this pad for the start of the World Unicycle Tour and I actually used a few of these over the course of the trip. It is the Climate Inertia X-Frame. It's super lightweight, but at this point it's got a lot of punctures in it. I've fixed them the best I can, but I probably do need to upgrade this at some point. My sleeping bag is the Mountain Hardwear Ratio 15. I've had it for a fair few years. And there's definite cold spots where the down has kind of shifted. And quite frankly, on the river trip, I got a bit cold. My heat was getting wicked away, like right over the torso. That's where the biggest kind of cold spot is. And I was finding that I wasn't particularly warm, even though it was spring in the UK. Moving on then to my cooking system. These pans I've had for a very long time, and they're still going strong. These are the Van Gogh hard anodized pans. They're the two-person version. I did have a little look online. I don't think you can buy these anymore, but I might be wrong. There might be something that's similar, but I like them for their size, so you can like cook up a big meal. And then inside that is just a random spoon. The Van Gogh windshield to kind of keep the wind out of the stove. And then the stove unit I keep inside a plastic bag to try and keep the kind of petrol fumes out. And the fun thing about this stove is I actually keep it inside a sock. It then doesn't sort of rattle around, and I think it protects the stove as well. So this is the Primus Omnilight TI, and quite frankly, this is a brilliant stove. I run it off petrol, which is in this bottle, but you can put a lot of different sort of liquid fuels in here, but I've only ever run off petrol because it's easy to find and it's cheap. Well, not at the moment, but cheaper than some fuels. I've bashed it around, I've taken it on pretty much every trip I've ever gone on, and it's still working perfectly. Occasionally the nozzle gets a bit sort of clogged up, but you just use the included tool, you clear out the nozzle, and then it seems to work again. And then for lighting the stove, I go with a lighter for the convenience, but I also bring with me a pack of matches just in case the lighter fails. Just to have options, you know? So that's my stove system. So while we're talking about stoves, let's also talk about food. So these two bags had basically all my food for 4 days. So lunch was wraps and hummus and olives and crisps and a packet of biscuits. And then for breakfast and dinner, I had porridge oats, and then I had a little bag of like fruit and nut mix that I've made up, which I also snacked on during the day. And then dinners, one night was pasta and also some noodle packets. And then I supplemented those with an onion, a handful of carrots and a green pepper. And then in addition to the food items, I also bring kind of seasonings and things. So this one, I think it's an old orange juice bottle, but I keep oil in this one. And then I've got seasonings, I've got rosemary in this one, paprika in this one, coffee goes in there. And you don't want to mix that up with the salt that goes in this one. Water-wise, I took one 1.5 litre bottle and two half-litre bottles, and quite honestly, I could have done with a bit more. Not initially when I was walking. I think I had the right amount. If anything, I had too much. It would have been better just to kind of hold off on the weight. But certainly later on in the trip, it would have been nice to have like a big bladder or something that I could have filled with water. That's something I'll do for next time, just bring a bit more water capacity, but it just about worked. The next category I'd like to talk about is all my electronics. And this section is sponsored by EasyViz and their PS600 portable power station. Obviously I didn't take this thing on the trip, but I've charged it up to 100%. And as I go through all the electronics that I did take, I'm going to plug them into this battery and we're going to see how far we can deplete this thing. So the two main cameras that I brought on this trip were these two GoPros. These are Hero 7 Blacks. One I pretty much had permanently attached to this headband. Look great, don't I? I know. And the other was just like on this little selfie stick, which I really like. It's from a company called Ulanzi, but for its size, it goes pretty tall. And that way you can be sort of running around, shooting yourself sort of in a more conventional handheld manner. And then when you want to capture a quick shot of you sort of walking past or whatever, pull it out, pull the little feet out, whack it on the ground, and you're good to go. I found having two cameras really useful, especially when I was in the boat. I could have one on my head, and then I could have one mounted on the boat, and then I can cut between the two. And then I don't really need to think about filming so much. Being able to be sort of hands-free was really great. So those are the GoPros, and for those, I had a handful of batteries. I had sort of 8 or 9 batteries, I think, and to be honest, that was only just enough to help keep stuff charged. I had 3 1000 milliamp hour power banks, and I was right on the edge of power when I got in on the 4th day. Anyway, these just about kept stuff charged. And the other camera I brought, obviously, is my little drone. So this is the DJI Mini 2, and this thing's brilliant. Like, for its weight, in order to be able to sort of show the context of where I was and what I was doing, it was just an amazing tool to have out there. Again, I had to be quite sparing with battery. Before I took it up, I go, okay, what's the shot I want to capture here? Work it out beforehand, then get the drone up, capture the shot, get it back out the sky. And that way I managed to just about film all I needed to film for the 4 days that I was out there. And then I had 3 batteries, and you can charge them up in this little case. And the good thing about this case that comes with the Mini 2 is that when you fly the drone, you're always left with about 10% of the battery left that you can't use in a flight. And the good thing about this case is you can plug a cable into it and you can charge from the remaining batteries and just eke out that bit of power that you were carrying that otherwise you wouldn't be able to use. In terms of data storage for camera stuff, I had a bunch of micro SD cards, and I kept those in this little wallet here. And then other electronics, got my phone. This is a iPhone 8. It's fine, did the job, sort of allowed me to sort of navigate where I was going, also allowed me to contact people if I did get into trouble, which I didn't, and also just tell people around me that I was safe and all right. And this is the little waterproof case that I put my phone in when I was on the water, just to give me peace of mind that if I did end up in the river, my phone would at least stay dry. And the final bit is this head torch from Petzl. It's the Petzl Attic. It has standard AAAs, which are rechargeable. So I brought a few spares of those. So that was my head torch, and this lasted me pretty well. And I almost totally forgot because I'm using it to record right now. But this is my audio recorder. So this is the Tascam DR10L with its lav mic that it comes with. I've also got a little sort of wind muff. And what I do is I put this in a little plastic bag, whack it in my pocket. This thing will last about 8 hours on one battery. And I basically just leave it recording all day. And then what that allows me to do is record audio separately from the GoPros, because if you've ever tried to record outside with a GoPro, you'll know that it's just wind noise. So it means I'm completely free to kind of talk whatever I want. I can set a camera up, I can be 500 feet away from it if I wanted to be. The audio is not going to suffer. And that just gives me the freedom to be able to kind of film how I want to film and know that I'm getting good, clean audio. That's my last little bit of electronics, and that takes AAA batteries as well, so same as my head torch. So I can bring a few AAAs and know that I can use them between the two devices. So in the end, charging all those electronics, I depleted the EasyViz PS600 down to 60%. It's a really compact unit, and I could see it being extremely useful for multi-day car camping, especially with its bright LED on the back. Its 607 watt-hour lithium battery lasts up to 1000 charge cycles, and charging through the mains isn't your only option. You can plug it into your car and even charge it with solar. I had a quick play with the EasyViz PSP 200 solar panel, and even in my slightly cloudy conditions, I was seeing readings of over 100 watts. Thank you EasyViz for sponsoring this part of the video. It's a really cool piece of kit. If you want to pick up your own PS600 portable power station, then you can in the link in the description. For pretty much all my equipment, but especially my electronics, I would keep them inside these Carry More dry bags. Stuff like the head torch and the drone and the power banks and all of that jazz. That all goes inside dry bags so that if I did slip into the river for whatever reason, I wouldn't wreck all my stuff. Yeah. Bag's getting heavier. Table's becoming a bit more empty, isn't it? Right, next item, clothes. So we're going to start with the clothes that I was actually wearing on the trip. So these aren't going to count towards the total weight of the bag, but I think they're worth discussing anyway. Start with the boots. These were a mistake. Quite honestly, I should have gone with a shoe that could drain water. The problem with these is they claim that they're waterproof. These are high-tech V-Lite boots. They're sort of synthetic things. They claim that they're waterproof. They're not. But once water's in them, they just become like buckets, and my feet were literally wet for 4 days. So if I was to do this trip again, I would go with something that would get wet, but then would drain water. Following on from the boots, I did bring a pair of waterproof socks. These didn't work, but I think that's just because my boots were completely saturated that it just had no opportunity to even try and keep my feet dry. But they were relatively comfortable and relatively warm, even with the water around the boots. My coat, it's a Craig Hopper. It did the job. It did rain a few times during the trip, so I was very happy that I had it. I would never do any kind of trip without taking a coat. A pair of underwear, obviously. I brought this very thin underlayer type thing. I pretty much wore this for the whole trip. This was very useful. I did the trip in spring, by the way, so it was still a little bit chilly in the UK. On top of that layer, I had like a running top. Nothing special, just something that kind of dries quickly and is quite lightweight. And then my trousers, again, were like Craig Hopper type things, which I've since actually properly stitched because I didn't bring a needle and thread when I fell over that fence, so I couldn't fix them. But now they're properly stitched up and they're good to see. Many more adventures. And then I've also got one of these fun hats with the lights on top, which I actually really like. I find them really useful, and it was quite useful going through that tunnel on the first day because I wasn't prepared for how dark it was going to get in there. And I just happened to be wearing my hat anyway, so I could whack the light on this thing and see a little bit more. And quite frankly, it's just quite a nice warm hat. I'd also be wearing this fleecy type thing, which I find really useful. I picked this thing up when I was in Australia, I think, when I realised it was actually much colder than I thought it was going to be. And I've had it since. It's completely bleached by the sun, but it's a really useful layer. It's quite thin and it keeps you remarkably warm. I've got no idea what it is. There's probably no way you'll be able to find this thing online anyway. And then on top of that, we've got a bigger fleece. This is a mountain warehouse type thing. It's thick, but it keeps you warm, and I also use it as a pillow at night as well. I also brought a little pair of gloves, but I didn't really use them very much because when I was going in and out of the river, these would have got soaking. So I didn't actually use them that much, but I was happy that I brought them. And that brings us on to the clothes which I exclusively keep inside the tent. Oh, apart from these ones. This is another pair of walking socks. So I had 2 pairs of walking socks total, which I changed after the 3rd day. But when you put them back in wet boots, they're just going to get soaking as well. But it was nice to have a change. But these are the clothes which I keep just exclusively in the tent. I keep a pair of underwear, I keep a pair of socks, and I keep a t-shirt. And I know that this stuff will stay dry. It's ready for me when I want to get inside the sleeping bag. And all my clothes go inside these dry bags. It's really important to keep stuff like sleeping bags and clothes and electronics dry. Everything else can get a little bit damp, but those items, it's so important. Otherwise you're in for a very miserable time. Right, let's get the stuff in the bag. Miscellaneous items. I think these are pretty self-explanatory. We've got a first aid kit, got a pen knife to be able to do various different jobs and also chop up my veg. Toothbrush and toothpaste, because oral hygiene is very important. You can't neglect this stuff even if you're out on a trip. And I also brought this thing called Tear Aid, which did feature in the series, and it helped me fix my boat when I got a puncture in it. That's all the miscellaneous stuff. That all goes inside this bag. And then before we get to all the kind of boat gubbins, I also brought these much thicker dry bags. This one is from Rock Bros. Yeah, this one's from Rock Bros. This one's a Sea to Summit one, which I use on the World Unicycle Tour. This thing is not waterproof anymore. I've tried to patch it, but the thing is kind of falling apart. So I kept stuff that wasn't so imperative to keep dry in this one. And then this much thicker one was stuff that I really cared about. And this was for when I was on the water and I wanted to transfer my stuff into these bigger dry bags so that my bag on the front of the boat wasn't as heavy. So I could actually get some stuff inside the boat at the back. Just whack them in for now, that's fine. And very excitingly, we've reached the last category. And that category is boat stuff. So the boat that I used on this trip was a Bestway Hydroforce Cove Champion. It's a one-man inflatable kayak. It's far too heavy, but I needed something for the trip, and I went on Facebook Marketplace and I found this thing for 35 quid. I think new they're about 80, but don't quote me on that. So it comes with an oar, which is broken into 3 sections, which was really useful to be able to sort of hike with. It also came with the pump, and for safety, I also brought this buoyancy aid, which I think I called a life preserver in the series, but it's a buoyancy aid. But I just thought, you know, if I'm heading out into rivers alone, I should have something just in case something happens, just to try and keep myself safe. I also brought this ground sheet. This is from a different tent, but I rolled it up in the ground sheet so that if I was like hiking around, especially like the first bit of the trip, I didn't want to be like putting a load of holes in the boat right from the off. So I'd wrap the boat in this and then tie it together with these bungees. And these bungees are Amazon Basic bungees, but they're the best bungees I've ever bought. I bought them close to 2 years ago now, and they're still going very, very strong, and I've used them on a lot of different cycling adventures and things. So highly rate them. And that's it, that's all the stuff. Let's get it on the bag and show the bag in its full glory. The monster bag has returned. Oh! So I hope that answered your question as to why this bag was quite so heavy. I'll try and leave links to all the stuff I mentioned in this video in the description. Please do check out my new t-shirt. I'd appreciate it if you bought one. It really supports the channel. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time for some other exciting adventure. See ya. Oh, I didn't miss this at all. Oh, really digs into the shoulders.